Hey guys, Happy New Year. My name's Yash and this is the Simple Living Guide. I share everything productivity, tech, reviews, minimalism, things like that. Just anything to make life simpler and more fulfilling. So 2021 was definitely a bit of a whirlwind. Lots of not so fun things and some pretty nice things. It was a nice summer, etc. The main three things I wanted to cover in this video were my favourite book from last year, my favourite film, and my favourite podcast. So without any further ado, let's get started. My favourite book from last year was this, Influence by Robert Cialdini. I actually first heard about it on a podcast called Freakonomics, hosted by Stephen Dubner. Great podcast, I've been listening to it since I was in school. And just before this book came out, I heard an episode where Stephen was interviewing Robert, the author, and he was talking about the different levels of influence, how to influence people, how people can be influenced, how to defend against it, and some really interesting topics were coming up. And I just thought, I've never heard of this. This sounds like a really cool book. I have to go get this. So just after the podcast, ordered this bad boy on Amazon, and as you can see, it's pretty chunky. It took me a fair few months to get through, mainly because I was being a bit lazy. And it's super interesting. The various levels of influence covered in the book, such as reciprocity. So for example, if you're nice to someone, they're obviously more likely to be nice to you and do what you want, and you can influence them by actually giving first, which is quite an interesting topic. Then there's social proof. We all go on it on various websites, and whenever you want to buy something, you look at the reviews, look at what other people, absolute strangers, are saying. That is social proof, and that's actually more and more prevalent nowadays, that we do a lot of online shopping, we get reviews from strangers, and we trust that over the words of sometimes experts. Pretty crazy. Third is scarcity, the classic 5 items left, buy now, or this is going to be gone forever. We're easily influenced by things like that. And there's so much more. The book goes through loads and loads of different types of levels of influence, goes into loads of detail, gives lots of interesting examples, and actually it was a real page turner for a book that's non-fiction. Non-fiction can sometimes be a bit dry, but I really enjoyed it and actually find it really useful, really applicable, and something I'm going to try hone my skills on and hopefully get my way in the future. We'll see. On to my favourite film. My favourite film last year was Dune, directed by Denis Villeneuve. That's what it says. It's meant to be like the sci-fi Lord of the Rings, and it really delivered. The visuals were incredible, the acting was brilliant, and overall super fast-paced and well-made. Interestingly enough though, I didn't like it as much as the book. So I read the story beforehand. Firstly, a very confusing read, because Frank Herbert made up this whole new world, made up loads of made up words as well, which made it very difficult to follow. But once I finished the book, I was really excited to see the film, and obviously you can only cover so much in a movie, and I really felt like the movie just zoomed through the entire plot line. As with most books that turn into stories, the book's always better. So I found myself filling the gaps in the film with what I knew from the book. So definitely recommend a watch if you haven't seen it. If you're interested, definitely check out the book as well. There's so much more depth to it. A bit of a difficult read, but pretty cool. So that was my favourite film. Absolutely brilliant. Great acting, great cast, great scene, great set, great story. So check it out. And my favourite podcast from last year. So I love listening to podcasts. As you know, there were various lockdowns last year, so not particularly fun. Nothing much you can do during a lockdown other than go for a walk, as we were sanctioned to do. So on my many walks, I would listen to various podcasts, and I've loved podcasts over the years as a great way to sort of learn on the go, dip in and out of whichever podcast you find interesting, and I absolutely love it. A new one that I discovered at the beginning of last year is called Business Movers. So what they do is take a true business story from history and theatricize it, if that's a word, into a 4-part episode. One of my favourite stories from last year was about Lehman Brothers. During the 2008 financial crisis, Lehman was one of the biggest banks in the world, and it absolutely collapsed. And when we know that, what's less known is that there were people inside Lehman trying to reduce the amount of risk it was taking on and take it off this collision course to disaster. And the podcast goes through the conversations that they had, how there was internal battles between the person at the top who just wanted to keep going because, hey, we're making loads of money, happy days, and these real experts in equities, debt and real estate who were saying, no, this is not going well, we need to stop taking on so much risk. And it's just a great retelling of a really interesting tale. It basically was like listening to a thriller. Absolutely brilliant. So yeah, super cool story. There's also other stories like Walt Disney trying to build the first ever Disneyland and how it was shrouded in secrecy, how he flew all over the country and flew to Florida many times to try and scout out the location without scalpers jumping in and buying all the real estate and land, so that the prices just went way too high. There's one about Uber and the very eccentric CEO who had to sort of bend the law to get Uber accepted and widely used across the US and further afield, and how actually the early days of Uber are sort of questionable, but obviously we're grateful in a sense that they did what they had to do, because they totally transformed the taxi hailing, ride hailing landscape in the world. And loads more stories like that. Just 4 parts, really interesting, absolutely told like a gripping story every single time. And for famous companies, Uber, Disney, DeLorean, General Motors, and how titans of industry and their leadership and founders really struggled with major decisions to try to propel those companies into sort of the next phase of growth. So super cool podcast, definitely check it out. It's one of my favorites and actually started at the beginning of last year, so you have a year's worth of story to catch up on. And that's it. While so much more happened in 2021, those are 3 real highlights in terms of great content that I consumed. What were your favorite books, movie and podcasts from 2021? Let me know. Hope you guys have a great 2022. Here's to more learning and growing, reading and listening, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.